So a lot of you guys, and I do mean quite a lot of you, have expressed a lot of interest in me at least troubleshooting this thing and taking it apart, and you guys seeing it on camera. I guess it shouldn't surprise me, but it seems like I've developed some sort of cult following as far as lawnmowers go. But you guys keep asking me to take this thing apart and look at it some more. There's hardly any compression. There's a little bit, and I am going to do a compression test just to see what exactly we're at. But the guy that I got this from ran this thing without an air filter on it. What ends up happening when people do that, especially with a small engine, is when you're mowing, or even when it's just sitting there running, it's sucking in dust and air particles and, you know, debris, even grass clippings, you know, stuff that normally an air filter would prevent from going into the carburetor and then into the motor. That ends up doing over time. It doesn't exactly happen overnight, though you can do a lot of damage in one run without an air filter on, is it will wear the rings out. Just for the sake of doing it, we'll actually go ahead and do a compression test on this thing. And we'll do a dry and a wet test so we can determine how damaged these rings actually are. So let me go ahead and get that set up, and I'll clip back in when it all is. Show you guys something interesting I found on the spark plug. Because there was no air filter being run on the mower. You guys can see this. There's actually a significant amount of debris that's actually impacting the spark plug from being able to do its job in creating a spark. That'll be cleaned off and, you know, reinstalled. So we'll go ahead and give it a few pulls. Well, that's definitely interesting. When I first got this thing, it was damn near freewheeling. That's weird. So, just for the hell of it, we'll go ahead and throw some oil into her and see what happens. The only other thing that can mimic a symptom of no compression besides the rings is if a valve had gotten stuck open or not, or wasn't sealing properly, which is definitely possible. That can definitely happen when you run an engine without an air filter on it. So I'm going to try something here, boys. Because this is kind of surprising. Because that could be, very luckily, what happened with this thing. Is that one of the valves could have just been impacted and not fully closing, which would definitely explain why it was essentially freewheeling when I first got it, as opposed to now, how it seems to have some sort of compression in it. So now there's oil in the cylinder. Let's give her another shot and see how much of a difference there is. We might be really lucky, boys. That's about $1.30. Seems to be that there's about a 30 psi difference. Now I know on cars, I don't know offhand for small engines, but on cars, if you have a 20 to 30 psi difference between a wet and a dry test, you're definitely right in the ballpark, you know, the rings being okay. I'm going to try and clean off that spark plug, throw some gas in this thing, and I'm actually curious to see if it'll actually fire. I'm not really sure about the carburetor, because it could just be that the carburetor needs to be cleaned out as well. But we'll see about that. But I'm definitely curious now, boys, because we'll go ahead and throw that spark plug back in after I clean it off, and we'll go from there. I'll blow it off with some compressed air and wipe it down with maybe some alcohol on a rag or something. So I just threw some gas in her. Check the oil right now. And you guys won't be able to see it because of how clean it is. But it is right where it should be. So I just put some starting fluid into it. go ahead and give it full throttle. See what happens. That's promising. Well, so here's where we're at now. Got the gas tank and fuel line removed from the carburetor. That part just came off. Not supposed to just come off like that. But here's the carburetor, and the fuel line goes right on this little nub right here. And this other one, you guys can probably see that now. That's where the hose goes from the primer bulb. It completely rotted off. I did cut the end right here just so I can verify what the inside diameter was, because I do have some extra line here. So now just to disassemble this and clean it out and see how gummed up it is. There's probably all sorts of crap inside this thing. Always Tecumseh's, boys. Look at that. That's so bad in there. All sorts of dirt and grime from leaving the air filter off. That's what all that's from, so that'll need to be cleaned out. And the inside, oh man, it's not looking good. I think I can save it. I wasn't going to show this at first before I took everything apart, but I'm actually going to show you guys that I'm going to go through this entire thing. I'm probably going to end up giving it a bath after I remove all the small ancillary parts. Honestly, this thing could probably do for a rebuild. That'll need to be cleaned off, but that won't go in the bath. But right now I'm prepping this thing, because before I put it in the bath, I'm going to do my best to take everything off and clean it first before I go that route. Ooh. That thing is messed up, because I am going to have to rebuild it. Might as well, because that little spring, I don't have another one of those. And that thing just crumbled. That is some nasty stuff on this thing. Spray that off as well. And just look at the inside of the carburetor. It's got a waxy kind of substance on it. Almost like off of a candle. That's horrible. Comes off though, I'll give it that much. But I'm going to go ahead and spray this thing out. And then I'll take the carburetor off of the intake and we'll dip it for a little bit, and hopefully that cleans it up good enough. Alright guys, so I've got the carburetor as disassembled as I can get it. And float cleaned up okay. I still got to go over it with a wire brush a little bit, but the float itself seems to be in decent condition. I have not done an actual float test on it to see if it starts sucking in water or not, but the inside of the bowl got cleaned out pretty nicely. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick all this in here. And I've got a couple errands to run, but I'll leave this in here for about a half hour or so. And this stuff does a really damn good job of cleaning up small parts. So we'll just seal up the can and basically go from there. So I got some stuff I got to do, and another part I got to pick up from the house. So I'll just leave that in there as it is. And when I get back, I'll have another look at it and update you guys with the findings. Alright guys, so it's been a little bit longer than a half hour, right at about 45 minutes actually. The carburetor's still in the chem dip. I haven't pulled it out just yet. But just for the hell of it, I called up my local lawnmower parts supply store, and thankfully I was able to get a new old stock air filter, hose adapter here for the fuel hose, and a carburetor rebuild kit. It's not really much of a rebuild kit because there's not any Welsh plugs in it, but I don't think there actually is any in this carburetor, if I remember correctly. So this was the price that I paid for everything. The air filter was the most, $11.32. The rebuild kit was $5.98, and the fuel fitting was $7.90. I did buy 2 cans of carb cleaner, as you guys can see. Total price, 38 bucks. Without the carb cleaner, it was like 27 and change. So that's not too bad. So as you guys can see, that new kit comes with, you know, a new O-ring and everything. So there's a lot of stuff that I can just throw in the bin there and leave it where it is. So we'll go ahead and pull this top off. So here's our bowl. And here's the carburetor, which I am going to need to give it a little bit better of a cleaning. Here's our needle, which we now have no use for, but we do need this guy, our bottom bolt. It's a small little hole right here, so I'll get some 20 thousandths mechanics wire and clean that out. So we'll go ahead and finish cleaning this whole thing out here, and we'll get going from there. And so now we're at the part where we can rebuild the carburetor. I say rebuild, but it's pretty much all you can do with these as far as rebuilding them goes. I just pulled out the old seat, used the drywall screw method. Came out really easily. Cleaned off the top of the float really well. Also cleaned out really well the bottom bolt, so that's ready to go back on. Bowl has also been nicely cleaned out. So now we're ready to open up our rebuild kit. That's the part number, in case you're wanting to know. Now, a trick to getting those small little seats back in is to find a screw or a bolt that just barely fits inside, and just seed about maybe a drop or two's worth of, you know, any kind of motor oil. You can clean it out afterwards if you care enough to, because that helps everything, that helps the seat go down into the tube. And you take your bolt, after you line everything up here, just kind of put it on top, and then take your bolt, push it down right into the middle, and it evenly sticks it down into the hole. Now this carburetor still has a bunch of corrosion and stuff on it. I'm not really 100% worried about it, but I am going to go through and clean it out again. All we have to do is, you know, put the float back together and everything. This is such a simple job at this point that it's really not that big of a deal, and you guys can see the end result. So when we get there, you'll know. Well, so it's kind of been one thing after another with this thing. I realized that I forgot to install the little elbow there that goes into the carburetor, and it's not even pushed in all the way, but that doesn't really matter. It's definitely in and seated correctly. Then I had to fix the magneto ground wire because it came off at the end. It was actually soldered on underneath this little tab, and then I drilled a hole through the tab because I thought I was just going to solder on another connection, but I don't know where the hell my soldering iron is, so I'm just going to stick it on like that, and if need be, I'll go ahead and replace it, you know, properly if it starts acting up. I'm not going to sell this mower on to anybody, so I'm not really too worried about that, but we're pretty much at the point where we can start going back together with everything. It's not really too much you guys need to see. It's really straightforward from this point. I still need to, because I sized up the line and everything. I found some proper sized line that was actually a bigger diameter than that one, inside diameter. And so I need to put that back on, put the linkages all back together, and reinstall that wire, and hopefully we can get her to run. Primer is working now. The other thing too is that line that I used isn't technically fuel line, so it's probably going to have the same issue. I don't know how long from now, but you know, if and when that happens, I'll just replace that as well. But I completely forgot to buy the proper sized actual fuel line. This is actually vacuum line, so it's not going to last all that long. But like I said, I'm not going to sell this mower. I'm just going to keep it. It's kind of cool having these old relics around. But pretty much now I'm at the point where I'm almost done putting everything back together, so that's nice. This was the box for the air filter. It's all clean now, but when he first gave it to me, this thing was coated in dust. That's how long it had sat on the shelf, I guess. And here's the new air filter installed. with a hose clamp. I gotta say, this is a very poor air filter design. I could very easily, I mean not horribly easily, but if I was to sit here and start wrenching on it like that, I could pull it right off. But it is pretty tight how it is, and hopefully it doesn't rattle off with the lawnmower when it's turned on, if it turns on. I also wanted to give a shout out to somebody who helped me locate some parts for this thing. Classic TV Man 1981X. Really gave me a good solid hand with looking up some of these parts. I just wasn't able to at the time, and sure enough, he was the one who was commenting on my videos and got the updates on my phone, and worked out from there. So thanks a lot, buddy. And so here we are, the maiden start. Never started this thing before, other than with the starting fluid earlier in the video. I'm really feeling good about this. Primer bulb's definitely working. We'll start it a little low. Seems to be idling a little high. I think that's a linkage issue. Might shoot some liquid wrench onto that butterfly valve too on the outside of it. And so I just tuned the carburetor a little bit. You guys heard it was running a little high. That's the full throttle screw. And this one right here is your idle screw. I don't know if you guys can see that. But basically, I just threaded it out. It was all the way in, and I just started threading it out with the mower running, and I got it to idle at a much calmer speed. So we'll go ahead and start her on low. Quite a bit better. So I'm definitely happy with the results. Definitely happy. I just can't believe that the compression came back like that. Like I said earlier, the only thing that makes sense is the guy was running it with the air filter off. The only thing that I can think of that could cause something like that is something obstructing one of the valves, so it was never able to get full compression with that going on. I mean, it could have been anything. Could have been, you know, a small piece of debris. Doesn't need to be all that big. It just needs to be big enough so that one of those valves won't close all the way. That compression test confirmed that the rings are at least okay for the most part. They're probably on the lower end as far as the compression disparity goes, because there's about a 25-30 psi difference, and I think that's a little high, but I think it still might be within reason. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I definitely enjoyed the second look at this thing. And because you guys kept asking me and talking to me about it, I just decided to go ahead and try and tackle it, and sure enough, it wasn't really anything that was really all that big of a deal.